Hey, so welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today's CSE Development in Action webinar is on how do we ensure that girls meaningfully gain from investments in education. A very interesting topic. I am looking forward to hearing more from our speaker. Today we have with you Commonwealth alumnus Sylvia Ichumar. Sylvia, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but please do correct me if not. Sylvia is a 2021 Commonwealth Shared Scholar from Uganda. She completed her MA in Gender and Development from the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex. I'm pleased to let you know that Sylvia works at the British High Commission in Kampala, Uganda. And as part of her work, she supports the British High Commission and the UK FCDO to, and also the Ugandan government to advance inclusive policies through her work. And in this webinar, she will discuss her work in supporting the government of Uganda and as well as the UK government and through the British High Commission to develop inclusive policies, one of which is girls' education. Through her webinar today, she will mark the recent International Day of the Girl Child, which was celebrated on 11th October. And the International Day of the Girl Child recognizes girls' rights and the unique challenges girls face around the world. Um, and I am aware that Sylvia will be talking about, why the need to talk about girls' education, not just in the global context, but also in the Ugandan context today through her webinar. So, without any further delay, Sylvia, over to you. Please do let me know when you want me to move to the next slide.
Okay, thank you, Eva. Yes, my name is Sylvia. I am introducing myself, Eva. Maybe we can start with that slide. I'm Sylvia Ichumar. As Eva said, I work with the British High Commission. I joined immediately after my scholarship as the Social Policy and Education Policy Officer, and
Yeah.
grew in the role to now leading education policy at the British High Commission in Kampala. I have, oh, sorry, we should have done an overview of the introduction. Yes, so,
Fine.
um, yes, so Eva has introduced what we're going to talk about. How do we meaningfully engage, support girls' education, investment in girls' education. And the overview really, we're going to all have an introduction, talk about the context globally in Uganda, and why is it important to invest in girls' education, having worked or working for the UK government, what are its commitment towards girls' education, and what is it doing specifically in Uganda, what are the challenges faced in this policy work, and then we would summarize, having listened to the experiences and examples, that summarize the actions we can take to implement support towards girls' education, and also, given that I work on policy, how to ensure policies respond to girls' education needs. Yes. Next slide. Yes, so about myself, I am from Karamoja. If many of you in Uganda might have heard of Karamoja. I'm from Karamoja. It's a pastoralist community in northeastern Uganda. I did a bachelor's in development studies at Makerere University, and then went on to do my MA in gender and development at IDS. But before that, my professional life, I started with Weltunga Hilfe, a German INGO, and I was focused on women's economic empowerment. I then moved on to UNICEF as a youth advocate in education, working on education and adolescent development in Karamoja. After which I moved to Save the Children and worked on education and child protection. And then after my master's, I went on to the British High Commission, where I worked on education and social policy, and now lead on education. I have also, over most of my lifetime, at least from high school, worked, volunteered on different issues that support girls' education, whether it is menstrual health management, to mentoring girls, to providing girls with basic amenities or facilities for to enhance their education. Next slide. Sorry that I am not the one in control of the slides because we had a technical glitch. So you'll keep on hearing me asking for us to move on to the next slide. Yes, so being a Commonwealth scholar, I'm sure you want to know, what did Sylvia learn, and how, is there anything that she learned that applies to what she's doing now? And yes, there was a lot to learn. But I think for me, the really most important lessons were, one, just that kind of learning the analytical skills, and unfortunately this is not something that our education system in Uganda offers. So just being able to understand the different dimensions of an issue, question data, question the sources of data and evidence, and the interest behind why certain actions or decisions are made. I thought that that was a powerful thing, especially with ideas that helped us to question kind of decolonial understanding of work and language, and especially for me who is working in the British High Commission. So being able to balance what the context looks like, analyze, have our the perspectives around Africa's experiences, as well as the new dimension of partnerships that we're going to with the British High Commission, and moving from the relationship of working with the colonialists to now working as partners. Um, the other really is in terms of applying local context to global ambitions and targets. For example, how do I shape the foreign secretary's ambitions to meet the needs of Ugandans, and being able to find that common ground, and so you're able to ensure that you're delivering on UK's ambitions, but also delivering on the things that Uganda needs. The other was really experiencing development and aspiring to shape the same trajectory. I think, I do hope that many of us felt the same thing, that you go to the UK, you experience a different way of learning, you see infrastructure, you see systems, a kind of systems working, and you aspire to you come back home and do the same. And I think, lastly, my course focused on intersectionality as one of the feminism approaches to development, feminist approaches to development. And I see now that learning was so important to me, and it's something that I continuously apply in my learning, especially in response to education, understanding that there are different types of girls experiencing different issues, and sometimes these issues can kind of multiply and form even more complex, challenges. And so being able to recognize that and apply that in how I would shape a program or how I'd make a decision. I thought those were very, very important skills, and I'm really, really grateful to have learned them in the UK. The next slide. So yes, I hope everyone is still with me. We are going on to start our webinar presentation. As Eva said, we are commemorating the International Day of the Girl Child, and today we celebrate this with a theme that is focused on girls' vision for the future, a future that is reflected in our SDG 4 and 5 that calls for quality education and gender equality. This theme kind of sheds a light on the combined need for urgent and persistent hope. That is what the focus of the theme was this year. Combined need for urgent action, what can we all do, and the persistent hope girls have for a better future, for better education opportunities, for example. So so to reflect on this, we look at this picture. This is a photo of this photo here reminds me of how far action and persistence can shape the trajectory of marginalized girls. And this is Gloria. Gloria is somebody I have known and worked with for close to 8 years. And here she is on the cover of the national strategy to end child marriage and teenage pregnancy in Uganda. This is a national strategy. So somebody I knew from deep down in my village. I was looking and working on some other work, and here I was seeing Gloria on this cover. So for me, her story is looking at her and seeing Gloria, knowing her story, it was just like, it made me reflect on so many things. And one of them, the most important, is that this is a story of Gloria choosing herself. And she does this when she decides to attend one of the community mentorship programs and registered to join school after she came across UNICEF Back to School campaign. So I did have a mentorship program in my community. One day, Gloria joins in and tells her story and why she wants to go to school. And shortly after, UNICEF had these annual Back to School campaigns, actually timely Back to School campaigns in the community, and Gloria decides to register herself. But it's also a story of extending opportunity. So when the school decides to let Gloria study for free, after listening to her story and understanding her dynamics, and then resultantly, when she's selected for the position of a school head girl, it's also a story of amplifying voices. When during a major UNICEF event, like I mentioned, I did work for UNICEF, and this is partly some of the processes that I participated in. So during a major UNICEF event, I asked our team to let Gloria share her powerful story, which I had listened to so many times, and I felt like deserved, a platform. In sharing her story, it built her confidence, but it also earned her. By then, Gloria was in primary six, so it had earned her an Irish Aid scholarship for secondary education. It also shaped, in that moment, I was there, it shaped the perspective of different actors, highlighting the challenges girls face and the persistent hope for a better future. And lastly, this story is important because had all the above, all these things, the opportunity, the choice, the amplifying of the voice, had they not happened, Gloria would at best still be working as a maid, which was her life before she chose to to have faith in herself. She would still be working as a maid, earning peanuts, and at worst, she would be a mother of probably 4 children. So this is a story of Gloria, and it's what we in having this conversation, it's what opportunity and persistence looks like. And this is not happening to only Gloria. There are many girls facing insurmountable challenges that undermine their right to education. And many of these, like I mentioned earlier, face intersecting challenges. So it's just beyond poverty, it's beyond issues of menstrual hygiene, it's beyond issues of disability. Some of them have all these things weighing down on them and even worsen their opportunity for education. So I'd like to share a bit about what the evidence looks like in the next slide. Yes, so what does the global context look like? According to UNICEF, globally, 119 million girls are out of school. And I'm giving these statistics because I'm giving statistics that are specific, mostly specific to the gendered experiences of girls because they are girls. And I know sometimes we get to ask this question, boys experience this too, but these are specific challenges that are accrued to girls because of their gender. So issues around poverty and multiple discrimination worsen girls' education opportunities according to the World Bank. Girls in many parts of the world miss school or drop out of school due to menstruation. Girls between 5 and 14 years spend 40% more time on unpaid household chores compared to boys. And 60 million girls are sexually assaulted on their way to school annually, according to the World Bank. Lastly, child marriage affects more than 41,000 girls daily globally and causing school dropout or causing for girls to never enroll in school. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, so that is what the global context looks like. And in Uganda, the situation still trickles down. It's nearly the same structure. According to the Uganda Democratic and Household Survey, 2019-2020, 37% of young girls and women aged 15 to 19 are not in education, employment, or training. And this is compared to 21% of boys. And then, sorry, there's a correction on this slide. It's the opposite. 67.1% girls cite insufficient funding as a reason for school dropout compared to 62.1% of boys. teenage pregnancy rate is at 24%. That's according to UBOS. That means for one in every four girls that you know, there is one who is pregnant or is a teenage mother. 8.9 million girls aged between 10 to 19 are at risk of harmful practices, including child marriage, according to the Ministry of Gender. And girls miss 1 to 3 days of school due to menstrual hygiene. Next slide. So let's move on to the importance of investment in girls' education. Why is this important? Why are we having this conversation? And yes, so coming to the specific question, I am often asked by why we need to why do we need to justify why half of the world's population, women and girls, why they need the same opportunities as men or as boys. And for me, the first answer is always that it's their right. It's girls and women have as much right and even as much right as men and boys to access to opportunity, and this includes education. These are rights enshrined in various policy frameworks, for example, the International Convention on the Rights of the Child and many others, which I am very sure that we are conversant with. So girls are entitled because they are human beings. The next one is that investing in girls assures us of better health. Women and girls are able to make better nutritional choices. That means for themselves and in future for their households, and which contributes to healthier communities. Uh, Also, it means that there's less kind of we have less girls who are marrying off at an early age and giving birth at an early age. They're less. It also the better health also translates into being able to make better health choices, which hospital to take, how much drugs, and things like that. But also, investing in girls increases societal contributions. It means that if we have a more, more women who are educated, then they are able to contribute to the formal, labor force, or even the informal labor force. And in doing so, then they're able to earn incomes, they're able to pay taxes, and you know they're able to earn higher incomes that then enable them to have better standards of living for themselves, for their families, and for their relatives, and actually invest in their communities. um, the other thing also is that it gives more freedom for both boys and girls. And this is especially around the issue of social norms. And we know this to be true, that social norms affect girls alone, but they do affect boys as well. The burden we put on boys to provide for families, the burden we put on boys to behave in a specific manner because they're men. If we are addressing these deep-rooted issues, if we are uprooting the issue from the roots and addressing social norms, then we are allowing both boys and girls to enjoy this freedom, to live more confidently, and to contribute collectively. There are spaces where girls and boys cannot work together, and yet it's possible that you will build more synergies by having both sexes working together.
Come on, chicken. Mm.
Are we okay? There's somebody. Okay. Yes. So then, like I mentioned, I work for the UK government, and the UK has made global commitments to girls' education, and I'm really, really proud to be working with the government that is supporting girls' education. It's doing this through policy advocacy, through diplomacy, through programs, and through thought leadership. So how is the UK doing this? Hello, are we together?
Yes, we are together.
Okay, I was hearing some kind of sound. So yes, how is the UK supporting girls' education? What do the UK's commitment looks like? One, the UK through the chairmanship of the G7 has made a global commitment to support girls in school. It's made a commitment to ensure that 40 million girls are in school and 20 million are reading by 2030. Um, the FCDO in 2023 published its Women and Girls Strategy, which commits to supporting women and girls to speak up, to and embolden and amplifies them, as well as it commits to invest and strengthen systems for women and girls. We have what we call the UK does work broadly in Africa. So we do have the Africa Strategy Inclusion Principles. This mandates that 80% of FCDO's bilateral aid programs focus on gender equality by 2030. That's the ambition. And those are the things that we work on at Post every day to be able to achieve this. It also delivers bespoke programs through global partnerships. The UK global programs and country-led programs and these programs focus on intersectional issues like issues of marginalized girls, issues of refugee girls, issues of girls with disabilities and the likes. The UK also provides leadership and actually has champions for girls' education. For example, for long, the UK has had a special envoy for girls' education who I met. I know some of us met the 2021 scholars, met Helen Grant. She came to speak to us. And yes, so these are the kind of actions that the UK is taking. The UK is offering scholarships, the Chevening and Commonwealth scholarships, and also just a sneak peek into the future. There's a new government. It's focused on economic growth, and we all know that there is a strong link between investing in girls' education and the achievement of economic growth. So I'm quite certain that while we're looking into the future, girls' education will remain a critical point of interest. Hopefully for the new government, knowing that there is a strong link between girls' education and economic growth. Can we go to the next slide? On UK support to Uganda on girls' education. So the UK in Uganda is partnering, and we love to use partnership, is partnering with the government of Uganda to deliver key targets on girls' education in the following ways. One, that we have the country business plan. So while we have all these global policies, each mission is mandated to develop a country plan that kind of outlines what its targets are in a specific country. And our country and goal 2 of our country business plan is focused on supporting building. Hello. Yes, so our goal 2 of the country business plan is focused on improving the resilience and defending the rights of vulnerable, marginalized people, and this includes women and girls. We have our safeguarding strategy. This ensures that all the people that we work with, or the contractors and everyone else that are programs, whoever works for the UK or is in contract with the UK, does not abuse the safety and rights of children. We also have programs that are designed to reflect global targets. We are mandated to ensure that each program targets a minimum of 50% of girls and women. So whether it's our health program, whether it's a growth and prosperity program, whether it's our education program or governance, it has to set a target of 50% of women and girls. We also have bespoke programs. We have a recently closed program, the Strengthening Education Systems in Learning in Uganda, supported 52% of girls with literacy and numeracy, and 50% of vulnerable girls access quality education. We had the Sexual and Reproductive Health Right Program, which closed, and we have a new one now called Empower, the Empower Program, still focusing on the same. It's addressing social norms and provided family planning. The previous program provided access to 4.7 million family planning services to women and girls, and the next program is targeting the same but with a stronger intersectional lens, supporting women and girls with disabilities, for example, also access sexual and reproductive health. We also have the Girls Education Challenge. This is what we call a centrally managed program. It closed recently. It supported 54,000 underprivileged and disabled girls to attain quality education and skills. And then we have the Education Cannot Wait program, whose targets focus on 50% refugee girls. So we have a long history of advocating for inclusive policies and are currently working on the National Inclusive Education Policy. And like today, We commemorate significant events related to girls. Last year, we had what we call the ambassador for a day, got other ambassadors to invite girls and kind of, experience what it feels like to take up an ambassador's role for a day. Just that was our way of motivating girls, showing our commitment and interest in this conversation or policy area. Let's go on to the government of Uganda's support to girls' education. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a partnership. We would never be able to work in a country if the government of that country is not committed to the same issue. So, in terms of what the government of Uganda has done to provide support to girls' education, it has delivered on progressive gendered policies such as the Gender in Education Policy of 2017. The government has appreciated and shown policy commitment to address violence against children in schools. For example, we have the National Strategy Plan on Addressing Violence Against Children, that is a 2015-2020 plan. It has it has built institutional capacity to address gender issues. We have a gender unit, for example. Hello, can somebody mute? Okay. So we have a gender unit at the Ministry of Education. We have a strong focus on training teachers on gender pedagogy and things like that. The government of Uganda has partnered with donors to provide targeted support for girls who face obstacles to accessing education, for example, through scholarships. I know that government of Uganda has a big partnership with Irish Aid to support scholarship opportunities for girls in Karamoja region, for example. Government has also invested in gender responsive infrastructure to address the water sanitation and challenges that undermine girls' attendance. We already mentioned how menstrual hygiene was such a critical challenge to girls' education. And so in 2019, for example, the government built 138 facilities in schools through the World Bank Fund. Lastly, the local governments have strongly engaged in community mobilization on back to school, like this case of the story I mentioned with Gloria. It was a UNICEF and local government partnered program. And so quite a number of local governments have these back to school campaigns, community engagements, just convincing parents on the importance of education. So it's not all rosy. There are challenges faced in this sector, in this policy area, and they include the following. Can we go on to the next slide? Yes. So one, in terms of limited resources, this is quite a major challenge for the whole of the education sector. For the last few years, it has experienced progressive budget cuts. The current budget of Uganda is 8%. Allocation to education is only 8%, while in around 2012, I think it was around 14%. So you can imagine that marked decline in budgetary allocation. And in the same measure, whenever resources are constricted, then you find that policy actors are focusing on what they think are key priorities. What is, what is the most important issue? So you find there's a more focus on teacher wages or on literacy and numeracy, which are also important. But because we have general budget cuts, then you find that little focus is paid on girls' education, and and so a little resources actually allocated for it. The other issue is on lack of policy implementation. We have these good policies. I could outline like a list of policies that are enabling girls to enter school, issues of violence against children, girls' education, and things like that. The government has done a good job on that. But there is an issue of implementation of policies. Most of these implementation are not well funded and not well supported. The institutions to actually support, strengthen them are not working well towards that. And so it becomes quite challenging. And the other issue is on backlash, which is a global phenomenon now. Nearly, you go on Twitter any day, you'll find backlash. Andrew Tate's talking about, men's rights and things like that, as though that in giving women more rights, then you're undermining boys' rights or taking away something from men or boys, and which shouldn't be the case. And yet here we are today, when we think that we've made progress on women empowerment, when we think that people are understanding what the context is, we are starting to move back and see, like, even policy actors, countries making big decisions on on what they think women or girls deserve, or especially when it comes to education. Like, for example, in Uganda, there is specific criticism around affirmative action, the affirmative action policy for university, and also there is criticism around the women empowerment in itself. The other issue that we have faced, and which we really, yeah, struggle with, is differing policy stands on addressing specific issues. One that, well, for example, we have the sexuality education policy. I know many of us, a few of us in Uganda might have heard of this, that there's been a push, clearly with justification, that sexuality education is key to equipping girls with knowledge on their reproductive rights, choices, and options. But the Ministry of Education and Sports is against this, and 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 the justification is on religious grounds. So we are using, so yes, that's it. I don't want to get into the heart of the matter, but there is this policy, or this direction that could actually enhance girls' ability to make better reproductive health choices, to be more equipped. And we have a government saying, no, that's not morally right, we can't have it, despite all the evidence that indicates that this is actually an important issue, and going in that direction would make things better. And yet we still continue to advocate and find a way around it. The other is, I will skip resistance from patriarchal systems to the issue of tick boxing gender responsive approaches. So I think the other challenge is really in, like, there's this sense that gender issues have become a tick box, which are often limited to data disaggregation: 50% boys, 50% girls, and that's it. But if you look into the matter, there is no clear approach. Like, what's the approach? How are you going to ensure that these girls are actually, 50% of these girls are going to be part of a system, are going to actually turn up to school? Is it just a matter of saying we'll ensure that they will, or actually putting in place clear steps and actions to ensure this happens and we address the challenges? So there is that issue. And traditional perspectives still cloud attitude towards intentional shifts towards investing in girls' education, especially in a country like Uganda, where religion is such an important component, tradition is an important aspect of our day-to-day life, and we still have a nearly patriarchal system. So these come at the center of policy decision making, and just how we can get things right. Lastly, on this, there is a limited political commitment, especially in the Parliament of Uganda, to make legislation that is more stringent, especially when it comes to addressing issues of child marriage and issues of violence against children. So I want to take you then to these pictures. So that, take the attention from me, look at this picture and tell me, what do you think? Anyone type in the chat box, what's your reflection on this photo, on these two photos? What comes to your head anyways when you see these two photos? Maybe some 2 or 3 responses.
Sylvia, if you can see in the chat box, we are already getting responses.
Yes? Okay. Yes, I'm seeing all men, no women, only men, a lot of men. Okay, what do we say about the good, wonderful? And then the second image. Gender equality. Okay, thank you for your wonderful responses. So yes, that's it for the first photo. This is supposed to be, this is a Kasim Girls Council. It's a council. It was the first council deliberating on issues of girls, and there were 13 men seated, and maybe just to add more so that it doesn't seem like I'm biased, they did say that there were women in another room on a video call, but still this speaks a lot to the amount of power other actors, for example, have in making decisions for girls, and how, like, can you guarantee that these men can aptly decide on what is best for a girl child? Because there are things that the experiences that girls go through that these men in their age group and by virtue of their gender they would never experience, and yet they are the ones at the center of making decisions for girls. And the other, really, I saw this and I thought that it was beautiful, clearly highlighting, different statistics, what this looks like in a way that catches your attention, in a way that kind of simplifies the matter, and in a way that kind of gives, like, it gives more strength to your argument, right? And for me, this was speaking on really the value of data when it comes to addressing girls' issues. And that takes us to what I want to get down to really summarize what actions can we take to support girls' education. We've listened to what the UK has done, we've listened to what Uganda has done, we've listened to the challenges, and picking up from this and from this experience, what does our summary look like? What key actions will you take up as this is what works, or this is what could work to address girls, you know, support girls' education. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, one, resource mobilization. Resources. This is either through overseas development assistance, like donors are doing now. We can call for donors to invest more in countries that are facing challenges with girls' education. We can advocate for government to increase funding, or even the efficient utilization of resources. Sometimes even the few resources that we have are so badly utilized that it does not make sense, that adding more money to it might not even make a difference. So unless we are reorganizing the structures to make sure the little money that we are getting is delivering, and identifying where exactly which fix is more important. And so we can, even if we're broadly talking of girls education, where exactly do we need these resources to go to in girls education, such that then we can see like tangible results, and this can contribute to more advocacy for further resource allocation. There's also opportunity for public-private partnerships. Our last education program was in partnership with the Peas. They do secondary education. It's a private, and it's supposed to be an INGO, but it also runs as private, a group of private schools. So kind of offered them support, and they're able to subsidize, they to subsidize education for girls from margin, offering scholarships or things which are just cheaper, cheaper admissions, like to school. So things like that, but also recognizing the important role parents play. It doesn't matter whether it's in-kind support or financial, it's important to still have parents at the center of this and contributing whatever support they can towards girls' education. The next is strengthening advocacy and commitment to girls' education through champions, through diplomacy, through activism and partnerships. Like, pick every tool necessary. If and that's the thing, you don't, it's not that, oh, it's activists who can do this, or it's only diplomacy. If there is space for activism, if you're in a country and things are just, and you need radical decisions to be made, we need the activists. If there is opportunity to have conversation and do diplomacy and use your bargaining power, then let that country do it. If we need champions, there are people who societies recognize and admire. We've seen like UN and things like that using actors and things like that to be ambassadors for specific issues. So we do the same. And also, as well as building partnerships, we've seen like the global partnerships in education, where different countries bring resources together to support key issues on education, and this can be the same for girls' education. And has been in some instances. The other issue is that, again, issues of girls' education. This is a lot of it is also an issue of social norms. So we need to tackle harmful and discriminatory gender norms through community sensitization, engagement with traditional and religious leaders. This is really important when it is possible. And where necessary, I will say again, radical leadership is sometimes important. If talking doesn't get things done, and there is a space to actually, do more activism and things like that, that's, in my perspective, that's okay. That can be as important also. Um, the other thing, like I mentioned earlier, really on intersectionality, there's need for targeted and intersectional approaches to address obstacles. And I'll give the example of the affirmative action policy. So we have backlash now, this whole perspective that, yeah, we shouldn't, women are taking away this from men, or investing more in women is kind of causing these challenges, family breakup, and things like that. And so there's some people, some forces that are using this to undermine the need for continued investment in girls. So, and they would pick on something like the affirmative action policy, and I'll agree, rightly so, in the sense that it will be like, oh, all the girls, even girls from rich families, are benefiting from this policy. Why should that be? And then our boys from rural communities are not. So let's scrap off the whole thing. And yet, in doing so, you're endangering and actually further like discriminating against girls who really, really needed this opportunity. So instead of waking up to say, let's take away this policy, why aren't we having a better conversation and say, look, there is this approach that we can use that will target marginalized children and people who really need it, whether it's a boy or a girl, to make sure that they access this affirmative action, to ensure that they actually access an education. So it's thinking differently, and for me, thinking differently now means thinking a lot about how intersectionality can apply in some of our programs. The other is that we need stronger mandates at different levels to ensure that programs and plans are gender responsive. For example, like there can be to high level decisions to say that you're not approving a program that is not targeting 50% girls and that does not have a clear approach. I know, like in the case of Uganda, the Global Partnership in Education, the Education Cannot Wait program are clear on their mandates for inclusion, and as well as for inclusion, disability, and gender, and and so there's no way a country like Uganda is going to develop its beautiful program and want to send it to the GP secretariat when it's not meeting those requirements. And so on the onset, there's a standard that has to be met. And this standard means that as many girls should access education opportunities as the boys. The other is, like I mentioned earlier, use your evidence, develop your evidence, and share your evidence. Conversations already, even in a space, for example, if you're a woman and you're speaking, I know this is widely said. We've had conversations around how you can be heard in a space where no one is listening to you. So if you already have certain disadvantage, you have to make sure that you are kind of restructuring and organizing yourself to make sure that you're heard, and evidence and using evidence and developing evidence and sharing evidence are very critical. Evidence is key in how we deliver our message. It serves to shock the audience. If I tell you 1 in 4 girls, like, just look into this room, if there are 4 girls here, one of them is a teenage mother. So you can imagine in the number of how many girls are in Uganda and how many are teenage, than just saying a lot of girls are teenage mothers in Uganda. Like, so what? You're likely not to get heard. And also it kind of simplifies the understanding of an issue. If like there are pictorials and infographics, this is actually what it looks like, 1 in 10, and you have a photo of like 1 and 10, that takes the message home and also highlights the magnitude of the problem. There's also need to build and strengthen coordination platforms for girls' education, um, whether through education forums and things like that, just structures and platforms that, enable collaboration, coordination, working together, keeping up to date, and things like that. And lastly, building institutional capacity to address gender sensitive issues, because institutions are a major tool in delivering programs. If you have a policy and you want to implement, and you don't have institutions that have teachers, you don't have, government officials to do this, then who is going to implement this? So you have to make sure that you're building institutions. If you're working for government or a program, or at whatever level, this is quite important. So that is about taking action. But because I work in the policy space, and I know policy is quite important. Like you want to implement all these beautiful things, and there will be limitations. And for me, that what in my experience now, and really why I made this shift from I implemented activities in Karamoja for nearly 6 years, to shift into policy, is because there are really two important things now that I've come to understand about policy. One is that policy is the basis through which any action is and measures are sustained. Like, if you implement, even if you come with this this national program, we want to do this, and you're implementing it at community level, even if it's a donor, for example, and you have this thing you implement, if there's no policy to back it up, you don't have a basis, first of all, to ask government to pick it up, or to guarantee the sustainability of this particular new approach. So you need a policy, any existing engagements and also that any existing engagements in that space, they have no legal grounding if it's not backed by a policy directive. The other is that policies act as a directive for government to invest on a specific issue. So it's not just about, this is a policy framework, this is a policy is actually a directive. Like in Uganda, and I hope that it is the same in other contexts. In Uganda, the Ministry of Finance is mandated to produce a certificate on financial implications, which the government uses to allocate budgets during the budget cycle. So anything that is a policy issue should have a budget tagged to it, and therefore then you can be able to implement whichever thing it is that you want to implement, or that government is set needs to implement. And so therefore we must ensure that any policy measures are fully responsive to girls' needs, and we can do so by doing the following: standardizing of education policy. Sorry, I think I've gone a bit ahead. Can we go to the next slide? Yes. Sorry. Can you, there's block? Yes. Okay. There's something blocking. Somebody's in the waiting room and it's kind of blocking the view a little. So how do we ensure that policies respond to girls' education needs? Like I mentioned earlier, use evidence for policy. It's hard to justify why anyone should do anything if there is no evidence for it. This is very, very critical. And consult girls and women on policy decisions. Please, you cannot assure me that you are having a council of 13 men speaking on girls' issues and that they will guarantee you that they're making the best decisions for girls. They can be part of that process as they should, like in all decisions, but they should not be the only ones or the majority in these kinds of decisions. So women should be consulted, girls should be consulted on issues affecting them. The other thing is using champion. Sometimes an issue cannot come to the table if no one is drawing attention to it, and being able to draw attention is sometimes requires knowing the right person to do it. If there's a celebrity who is interested in these issues, how can we utilize their already existing platform to actually amplify the specific issue? If it's an issue around violence against children and there's somebody who is like, utilize them if they have platforms, if they have networks, such that you're bringing the issue to the people, to to you're making it an important issue, and in that way then government can pick interest, because sometimes that's how government makes decisions, policy decisions. It can make a policy because it wants to, or for political reasons, or but also because there is demand. And if this is something we are creating demand for, we are insisting and we're using champions to do this, then it's likely that we will ensure that our policies respond to girls' education needs, because then we're having more people interested in this issue and developing related policies actually. The next one is build and strengthen coordination platforms for sharing knowledge, building evidence, taking collective action, and actually tracking progress. Working alone does not take many of us so far. And I love that in Uganda now, as in many other places, I know from sharing lessons with other education advisors, that we're learning the power of coordination platforms. Like now in Uganda, we have the Education Development Partners Group. We come and discuss what the issues are, how can we advocate strongly, what evidence is there, who is doing what here, what can we learn. Such things strongly contribute to the kind of results or trajectory that you'll gain when advocating, for better policies for girls. Lastly, there's need to standardize education policy requirements. And what do I mean by this? Because I would say that any policy should not be about a fight for who deserves what. And I strongly say this as a feminist. It should not be about a fight for who deserves what. There will be spaces where women will not be, or where men have stronger voices, and standardizing ensures that the baseline is clear and focused on approaches rather than on those who deserve to be included. So if there are set guidelines that for any policy issues, for example, passed in this country or in the British High Commission, for any program that you are developing, it must support 50% women. That's the baseline. You're not entering a room to argue about whether we should include girls or not, or how expensive it is to do this consultation, or how expensive it is to target disabled girls. Like, that's no longer your minimum. Your minimum now is that we must deliver on 50% girls. So the conversation is about how do we actually support these 50% girls to achieve this kind of quality education. So you kind of shift the struggle, you shift the energy and the investment from people who are investing their time and energy. You kind of shift the dynamics from trying to get into a space to now having a conversation about how do we make this much, how do we make it possible, how do we make it easier, how do we make it targeted for girls to be able to actually gain from this program, from this policy, or from these specific actions. So in my experience working on the policy space, from my learning, for me, these are the critical ways through which we can ensure that policy responds to girls' education. Thank you. Can we go? Yes, so do we have any questions?
Great. Thank you
Hi,
so
everyone.
much. How are you?
Yes.
It was a long presentation, so I'll give you a few spare moments before we jump into the questions. I am aware that we have run a little over time, but we will still take in a few questions before we move into the post-webinar networking session for a few minutes. I would like to start with a few questions that were sent by you all via the registration forms. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, please do send them in the chat box. Thank you. Sylvia, so I would like to start with a few questions.
Yes, please.
What are some of the existing policies that face returning to school child mothers?
Existing policies or policies
Yeah, what are the
problems?
existing policies that face teenage mothers returning back to schools?
Okay. So that doesn't seem quite clear, but
Are
so in
there
terms of
any, yeah, are there any existing policies that
uh,
are that
that
address, yeah,
supports,
that address
yes,
any
yes,
challenges around teenage pregnancies and
yes.
teenage mothers returning back to schools?
Yes, actually, in Uganda, we do have a strategy for reintegration of teenage mothers into schools, and this was post-COVID, from understanding the challenges girls and how many girls were getting pregnant, especially in Uganda. So we do have a strategy for integration of girls in school. But again, there policy implementation is a challenge, and traditional norms, and at school level, and even for politicians, there's some who are against such policies, but in terms of broader legal policy framework, yes, we do.
Okay, thank you so much for your response. Um, for the girls from marginalized, mobile pastoralist communities in Uganda, how can school enrollment, retention, and completion of school be accomplished?
Mm. Yes, I like this because it really strongly applies to me. I come from a pastoralist marginalized community, and I have done quite a lot of trying to get this to work. And I think, and from my learning at IDS, one of the things that I've understood that has been the difference to how I think differently now. Before, I would say, talk to the parents' mindset change, and because we've done this, but I think one is understanding the first of all why girls are making these decisions around coming to school versus not going to school. Does are the rewards to education quite clear for girls in marginalized pastoralist communities? Because that's the thing, and that's the difference. There, it's about cattle, it's about what you see now, it's about how, what are the returns now, and what, how long does it take to get into school. And so being able to have a conversation with communities about that, but why broadly it is important, not just going and saying school is important and things like that, but really how, what the offer is to education for a girl. So if we are doing community sensitization, that would be how do it differently, engaging parents on what the offer is for girls and how it can shape their outcomes in a much better way, and how it can, for most of these communities, they are traditional, and how it can be linked to their traditional life. And so there's been like this conversation around educations brings modernity. You know, that kind of like pitting tradition against modernity. It doesn't work for pastoralist communities. They are grounded in their culture, they love their culture. So being able to set education as the thing that enhances a girl's aspirations, which include her cultural roots, is a better way to have those conversations. But also for many of these girls, they're really clear cut systemic challenges like poverty, that it doesn't matter how willing somebody is, it is just hard to help them. So that's why opportunities like scholarships are really important for, for girls, and things that address, their gendered experiences around, household needs and things. So accelerated learning for girls, just more accessible education opportunities, and I mean more access to education spaces in terms of close proximity of education services to pastoralist girls would also be a clear way to support them.
That's a really great response to the question. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your own personal experience as well. Um, And moving on to the next question, you did mention, that you have quite a lot of volunteering experience through, various programs aimed at educating girls in Uganda. The participant who has asked the question would like to volunteer in, similar causes, and is asking if you could provide guidance on available volunteering platforms in Uganda, or if, workplaces such as yours is currently running any such programs where volunteers could join in this cause.
Mm. Yes, so two things. One is I have volunteered through organizations. Like my first voluntary work was through Save the Children, but I also know that coincidentally, them being able to pick me was because I had started the initiatives on my own straight out of university. It was something I was passionate about. So I would go home once a year, hold these like mentorship, speak to mentors, like women to come and help me mentor girls and things. So I kind of built the whole structure myself, spoke to people who can help mobilize like small, if it was just money for a soft drink and a biscuit to make sure that 100 girls are in the room. I would ask one or two people or leaders in my community and they would be able to do this. And so I just started from that, and that has really shaped how far I've gone in this kind of. So from that, then somebody from Save the Children is a good example because I work there as a volunteer. Sometimes they do have these programs, so look out for them. UN volunteers is good. It's quite structured and goes through, but it does offer the same opportunities. So these are kind of especially, but a lot of it has been personal initiatives, trying to partner with people, looking out, proactively looking out for this, but also seeing what I can do personally. I didn't need to go big and look for big monies. I just needed a soda and a biscuit, get girls in the room, have the conversation, bring people to talk to them. And that's where I started impacting on girls.
Thank you. That's quite inspiring. Um, Moving on to the next question, you mentioned that policies have the potential to make a difference, and the only drawbacks, the participant is saying the only drawbacks are development takes long and implementation is not really guaranteed. From your experience, how can these challenges be mitigated?
Yes, so that's the thing. Thank you for that question. That's the thing I'm learning about policy. I think before I was in the policy space, it was like a policy is important, like we need to have a policy on this. And now I'm learning that a policy is really the first step. After a policy, you need strategies, you need guidelines to make sure that government actually has specific ways in which to achieve this. And then you move on to that, you need other institutions existent. So interestingly, it's a more elaborate procedure compared to, I don't know if many people think the way I do, but I always thought once there's a policy, there's a clear link to implementation, but sadly there isn't. So it's really knowing and recognizing that just beyond the policy, there's more action to be taken. The whole system has to be working, has to operate, and either you're taking it step by step or wholesomely, or if you're lucky, you will be implementing policy where already institutions exist, and so then you're kind of just getting to the process of it all. But for me, I think it's recognizing that this is a challenge, especially for countries like ours in Uganda. There's always more work to be done.
Mm, mm.
I don't want to sound pessimistic or what, but just recognizing that challenge and opportunity as well.
I think that leads on to the next question on, how can one make a difference in their personal life?
Mhm.
How can someone impact gender equality by bringing changes into their daily life? Or in other words, what positive changes can Commonwealth scholars bring to their lives to achieve gender equality?
Thank you. So I haven't checked who is in the meeting room, but I hope that we do have a good number of male men as well in this
Yes,
in this
yes,
room. Yes.
yes.
So the thing about gender is that it's not an issue that should be done, like it's not something that you pick and say integrate. When we say mainstreaming, so that, oh, okay, after all, oh, then let's remember gender as well. It is supposed to be like a lived experience every day. How do you breathe gender equality? How do you act? How do you treat people around you? Because if you're in a space and you don't recognize that when a woman is speaking, that you're actually blocking her or you're mansplaining, or then it's likely that when it comes to making a policy decision, you're actually not going to, you might even be biased. You might be intentional about gender equality, but your unconscious bias might actually drive you to making a decision that does not favor women. So for me, it's always about the day-to-day experiences, how we act, how we are intentional about recognizing that maybe as males or even as women, there are some women as well, older women and things, more educated women, how we are at a better advantage, recognizing that and seeing then how you can be able to address this issue and how you can be able to support somebody who is not as advantaged as you because of their gender to be able to get better, their gender and other intersectional issues like social status and things like that, to be able to do better. So it's in the everydayness of things. If you start from there and you are aware of that, it shifts you then to being able to translate that into how you make policies and how you recognize other people in the same space.
Great. I am conscious about time, so I'm just going to take maybe one last question, because I would like to leave enough time for the networking session. Um, so the last question is, you mentioned about inclusive policies, and inclusive, education. Um, does your work, or does the British High Commission in Uganda support the education of girls with disabilities in your country?
Yes, yes. Actually, that's one of the things I'm working on. So we have a program that recently closed, the Girls Education Challenge. It was focused on disability inclusion and was supposed, I mean, supported nearly out of the 54,000 girls that it supported to access education, 3,000 of them were actually girls with disabilities. So yes, we do. We do support girls with disabilities, and including, and the other thing we did, for example, in the ECW Education Cannot Wait program. So while it is a global program, UK contributes to it, comes to Uganda, to the government of Uganda, and implementing partners. We have a say in developing the terms of reference and things like that. So we took that opportunity to actually focus on intersectionality. How do you support a refugee girl who is disabled to actually access an education? So in terms of intersectionality, refugee girls were a critical component, and we have two partners that were actually in the EC. It's a consortium of partners working on
Mm,
different education issues in the refugee community, but two of those partners were actually implementing on disability inclusive education.
that's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing this with our audience today. Um, As you can see, I have moved the slide to contact details. If you would like to hear more from Sylvia about her work on girls' education, on inclusive policies, and her work at the British High Commission, and the amazing volunteering work that she does in Uganda, please do get in touch with her. You can see her LinkedIn name on your screen, as well as her email address. So please do keep a note of her contact details, and Sylvia will be more than happy to connect with you to discuss her work more in detail with you all. With this, I would like to formally thank you, Sylvia, for the amazing presentation on your work, and for sharing your expertise with our community, with the CSE community of Commonwealth scholars and alumni. I'm assuming we do have quite a lot of new scholars who have just started their studies join us today for this webinar. So I hope you have all found this webinar inspiring in the work that you will go on to do once you complete your studies. Thank you so much, Sylvia. Any final words before we end the presentation?
It's been a real pleasure talking to the Commonwealth scholars. I know these are all notable people, ambitious and brilliant people. I do hope that this is something that is really important, whether even if it's not girls' education, but there are ways, in different ways, through which the different areas that you're working on, that you can still support girls, to have a better future. Please do it, and start in the everydayness of what you are doing. Be mindful about how you support women and other marginalized people.
Great, thank you. And I would like to thank you all for joining the live webinar. I hope you have found this useful. I can see quite a lot of amazing comments coming through and positive feedback coming through in the chat box. Please do share your feedback in a feedback survey that you will receive shortly. But yeah, thank you so much. And I hope you have noted down Sylvia's email address and LinkedIn profile name as well.